Hi, I'm Cynthia Schiller. Please like and subscribe. So we're going to talk about our narcissist, the brain damage. Can it be healed? Also, traumatic brain injury, TBI, because that's often similar and confused with narcissism or different mental illnesses. So in the brain, there are damaged cells when we go through abuse, whether uh, emotional abuse, sometimes traumatic brain injuries. So these brain cells, known as neurons, they can't regenerate. So the damaged area gets necrosed, which is tissue death, and it's just never the same. So when the brain gets injured, you are often left with disabilities that will persist for the rest of your life. So there are certain areas that can regenerate, and some that just can't. One of the reasons most cell growth is limited to the smaller number of precursor cells, the brain cells don't regenerate because all of their value is in their connections. So once they die, the connection information is lost. So our narcissist became so damaged that they don't have the connectivity or very little connectivity. That's when it cannot regenerate. And I just did a video on the more that we're in these, some brain cells are taken away, some can be regenerated, but when the connections, when we're going through the abuse, we're not adding like we should. So the connectivity, once it's gone, it's gone. So what part of the brain is responsible for regeneration? Has shown it's in the olfactory bulb, responsible for the sensory information such as the sense of smell. A part of the hippocampus, responsible for memory formation. The hippocampus can regenerate somewhat, but the amygdala is where the emotions are. Each part of the brain does its own function. So our brains, let's talk about the plasticity. Brain plasticity is a term that refers to the brain's ability to restructure and reconfigure itself in response to change. So sometimes if it's not growing, it's reconfiguring. So this change can influence a brain in different ways. It deals with learning, experience, aging, and unexpected changes include things like stroke or head injury. Neuroplasticity, the change in our head, has long been observed in children. It has neurogenesis, which is the formation of new neurons in the brain and also in various portions of our nervous system. So two types of brain plasticity. That's the structural plasticity. I've been teaching too much, kind of tongue-tied. So there was a small study in 2018, and it showed that healthy adults who participated in a balance training twice a week, they did this for 12 weeks, they were able to thicken certain areas of the brain that's involved in the spatial orientation. They had a study in 2016 examining the neuroplasticity for people who are reading Braille. And those are those little dots that the blind people use to feel and read on paper. So over a course of daily lessons, it took 3 weeks, they increased connectivity in regions of the brain involved in processing things such as touch. So they became more in tune with feeling things. I'll tell you what, I'm good at sign language. I tried learning Braille. My brain cannot decipher. I can look at the dots. I can't feel the dots the right way enough. Braille, Helen Keller was amazing. But functional plasticity, this is our brain's ability to heal after injury. And this is kind of important because we've gone through some brain damage. People who have traumatic brain injuries have gone through some things. I talk about this Phineas Gage who had a metal rod go through his head. He was lucky it poked through to release the brain pressure, but it changed his personality. People with strokes can have changes in their personality, their ability to regulate or feel emotions. So the functional plasticity is especially relevant for these people who have had head injuries and are trying to recover. Back in 2017, fairly recently, they reviewed some studies on this role of the neuroplasticity within stroke victims and their recovery. And they found that a stroke can actually trigger neuroplasticity within certain areas. And that plays a key role as the brain is trying to resume its regular normal functions, whether it's speaking or controlling the movement of our arms and legs. So can this plasticity help us heal after we have a TBI, a traumatic brain injury? And TBI can be caused by an external force, such as a serious blow to the head, a fall where you hit your head, a car crash, damage that's done. Also, too, when you have a TBI, traumatic brain injury, you can have closed head injuries and open head injuries where the brain, the skull kind of cracks. That'll release some pressure. Sometimes it is better to crack your skull because the pressure is doing more damage. So a closed head injury can be more damaging. So there's a non-traumatic brain injury, which is also considered an acquired brain injury. And that relates to internal factors such as a stroke that can damage brain tissue, affect the muscle control, speech, cognition. That can also be from a high fever, you can get brain damage. So this neuroplasticity therapies that they use to treat the stroke survivors suggests that we should approach it so that brain stimulation therapy and virtual reality might actually help enhance this brain plasticity. Might be able to possibly transfer nerves from healthy parts of the brain to injured parts. And they did cognitive rehabilitation. They're trying to get these people to increase their thinking skills. And there is some insight that that's able to be done. So since each part of the brain is responsible for different functions, it depends on the location and also the severity of the injury to determine how it's affected, to what degree it's affected, what the chances and likelihood of them healing. And, you know, certain areas of the brain are responsible for moving our right foot, left foot, our arms. It just depends on where this damage is. And the narcissist is damaged in the amygdala. And they're starting to damage our hippocampus and also change the cortisol and the activity in our brain within that amygdala. And we don't want to lose that. We need to heal from it. So just as exercising and learning can enhance our brain structure and function, the body's natural healing and recovery process also can increase neuroplasticity. So people with traumatic brain injuries, sometimes it only lasts a few months, but they're going to go through different emotional outbursts. But when the neurons die to injury, the brain's naturally responds within a few days, and it'll develop new neural networks. Just depends on where it is and whether those were damaged or killed for those cells in the injury. Also, the age depends. There's a lot of different factors. So older individuals, even if they had less severe injuries, the younger patients improve more in the first 5 years after the injury. So age does play a part, just like our narcissists. You know, they got damaged at an early age and it just kept going. They didn't grow out of it. But the younger you are, and you have a chance of healing, but the narcissist didn't get out of that. They kind of stuck into it because they were abused as well over a period of time. And the 5 similarities that are similar to mental illness and traumatic brain injury. Social isolation, that mirrors mental illness. Extreme emotional outbursts, aggressive behavior, behavioral disinhibition, and depression. So the social isolation describes one of the 4 defining features of these personality disorders as interpersonal difficulties. And our narcissist goes through that. They have a difficulty forming and maintaining relationships, tied in with problematic symptoms with their mental condition. So also people who have had these TBIs, traumatic brain injuries, they'll suffer social isolation as a result of their condition. It can result in the loss of old friends, difficulty forming new relationship, and depending on this victim's age, the injury might also disrupt developmental processes, causing increased social anxiety, which leads to more isolation. There's often extreme emotional outbursts. It causes emotional liability when certain areas of the brain are damaged. So it does, like I said, depend on where they're damaged, but their emotions can be unpredictable, extreme, unstable. Sometimes they'll have pathological laughter or crying. It just comes out of nowhere. And that's when they just spontaneously, uncontrollably start laughing or crying. And that's because of the brain injury. They have a dramatic reaction and it'll mimic emotional dysregulation. And it's similar to how people suffering from borderline or other cluster B, narcissism is in that cluster B personality disorder group. So emotional dysregulation manifests through mood swings, and they just have impulsive behaviors, problems with relationships. So TBI victims, similar to cluster B people, and PTSD will suffer emotional dysregulation, and they'll do that through avoidance, anxiety, anger, sadness, and guilt. So they also, due to all these things that are going on, start to feel aggressive. Cluster B, our narcissists, they're characterized by an overall disregard for the feelings and rights of others. And I'm sure you've seen that where they do something wrong and they don't see it being a big deal, even when you try to explain it. And then you explaining it turns into ticking them off because they have this inability to empathize. And because of this, it results in hostile, aggressive, or manipulative behaviors. And this can be seen as early as childhood. So the cluster B individuals, those traits are inflexible. That's who they are. So anger and aggression are common problems for people with traumatic brain injuries. Too much stimulation, whether it's a sudden noise, increased anxiety, whether it's stress from injury, pain, fatigue, also increased rigid thinking, impulsive anger in the victim. So unlike people with a personality disorder, the TBI can gradually develop a greater ability to control their actions through emotional rehabilitation. So let me say that again. People with traumatic brain injuries can gradually develop an ability to control their emotions, but the narcissist, it's so hard to explain that they just don't get it. And for the longest time, I was like, well, they can learn it. They can't. And with my second one, narcissist, trying to explain things, and you can just see there are times they try to at least listen, but they don't get it. They don't have to agree with me. I don't care if they agree with me. They don't even get what I'm saying. And you say it so many times, so many different ways, and you're like, how can you not understand what I'm saying? They don't. They honestly don't. And it's mind-blowing. So often they'll have behavior disinhibition. Flexibility allows healthy people to properly balance their impulses. We have impulse control. But people with cluster B often manifest these symptoms through avoidance. They're hypervigilant. They might have a reluctance to try new things. Mine didn't mind trying new things, but it depends on what it is. A lot of times creatures of habit and a reluctance to try new things. You can think about, why did they hoover back? because why try a new thing if something works? Instead of risking the unknown, they'll go back to something they knew, which is a person. And unfortunately, they see people as objects to just go grab off the shelf, which is sad. But they had some recent research published through the Neurological Rehabilitation Institute, which is located over at Brookhaven Hospital, and showed the impulsiveness level in these test subjects that were rats increased after brain injuries for up to 8 weeks. So after the injury, they were more impulsive, and these are rats. So if you think about the lifespan adjustment, it can last a while. So depression is another thing that traumatic brain injury victims will go through. They're saying nearly half of all individuals with TBI will suffer depression within their first year of injury, and about 67% will be affected within 7 years. So there can be physical changes, emotional response to the injury. It can put them at a higher risk of developing depression, because this injury, whether they feel sorry for themselves or why did it happen, or they're frustrated with their loss of function or change in life, maybe they had a breakup because of it, whatever it is, it's leading to depression. And people with a depressive disorder is characterized through depressed thoughts, anxiety, also sadness. So research suggests there's 5.3 million individuals around the globe who suffer long-term complications due to brain injuries. And they're just touching on the surface between the links of mental illness and traumatic brain injury, because some is long-term and some is for a little while. But we have to all interact with each other. And our society has a lot of people struggling with a lot of things. There's a lot of stressors. It's a dog-eat-dog world. We're not helping each other. We're not doing things in loving ways anymore, as a general rule. And, with the two-parent families working, in general, you have a truer love, a deeper love when the parents take care of the child than when an outsider does. The kid will still get some love, but it's changing our society. Also, the one-on-one attention at school. We have 28 kids in Michigan in our schools, in our classes, and I know when COVID happened, we had like half. We did it. What was it? It was we had 3 types. You had your Monday, Tuesday kids off on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday kids, just because of COVID, and some could stay virtual. So we had like 1/3 to 1/2 of the kids show up because they were separated, and it was nice. Even your kids that would fight normally were not fighting. The classrooms were manageable. When they all came back, all 3 groups, you have all the chaos again. There's not that one-on-one nurturing, or at least enough attention. And it lowers their, I guess, feeling lost, that they're not going to be seen. And so they know they're going to get a little bit of attention, so they don't have to act out. And the narcissist, as they were growing up, they had to act out. They had to make up stories that they were the greatest, or just they needed the love that they didn't get at home. And the sad thing is as an adult, when we do give them the love, even that's not good enough. So you can't fix a narcissist through love. You can't, because that's uncomfortable to them. They either don't, like my second one even basically said, that they, in a sense, don't deserve it. But it's little things. They don't say it full-heartedly, but they'll slowly say certain things. They know that they've treated us wrong. They know when they've done that. But it's the desire to change. It's a desire to change. If they don't have empathy, like right now, I could tell you I broke my leg. I've had different kinds of breaks. Some were severe, some were cracks. And there's varying degrees. And if I told you I broke my leg, it really hurt. Um, if you've never done that, you don't know exactly how bad it is. And if you could relate, and I told you I broke my leg, you might relate it to the minor one if you've broken your leg, because you haven't experienced like the severe crush and fully broken and needing pins. And so you might not understand it. You might relate it to something. The narcissist doesn't relate to us. And if they do, it would be at the superficial level where you're like, oh, that probably did hurt. Oh, I have no clue. Um, but it's the severity, like they just can't relate to us because they haven't really experienced it when they needed to. And then they run from it. They run from it because they're protecting themselves from the unknown. They wanted that love their whole life, but when they get it, it's not home to them. And that's our happiness. Our happiness is emotionally feeling at home. So we tend to recreate our childhood. And with more and more narcissistic people raising each other, it's causing a lot of damage. So I hope that was interesting to you. Topic requests are welcome, and I will see you in the next video. One-on-ones are available. And as always, enjoy the day.